right. Hello, everyone. Just making sure that we're getting set up here. Let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm not seeing... Let's see. Okay, good. I'm going to post the link for this session in the comments of the ViewC page because I'm not seeing a video player on my side. So, if for some reason you're having trouble viewing it on ViewC, I don't know why the video player isn't appearing here. There's a direct link to the private YouTube link as a second stream. Well, happy Sunday. I hope you all are doing okay in spite of the crazy year that we've been having across the planet. A lot of collective breakdown, which I tend to try to be optimistic about in the sense that I do believe that necessary breakdowns allow for the possibility and invitation of breakthrough. And on this topic of today's conversation, it's that very thing of the sacrifices we make in order to have greater points of enlightenment in our lives and in our practice, whatever it is, be it creative or pragmatic. So I'll just jump right in, and if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the comment section of the ViewC page or the YouTube page here. I see the first comment there. That's great. So, yeah, this thing of the blocks that we all face. First, and maybe some of this stuff will be common knowledge, but it's always good to reiterate it. We all have periods of dormancy in our process. If, as an artist, I can speak to that. And I often think of a fruit-bearing tree and the resources that it takes for that tree to bear fruit, and then the necessary time periods that that tree needs to be dormant so that it can store up energy to produce more fruit the next year. In my life, it's been a difficult thing because of the fact that I've relentlessly wanted to be the most productive I could be, as if to prove something to myself. Also, just knowing what it feels like that, getting that runner's high to be in a creative flow state. I yearn for that. And so a lot of the little tricks I've done over the years to hack my own process and also be compassionate with myself have a lot to do with being at peace with the ebb and flow of creative output. Knowing that some days you just need to take a walk or you just need to lay in bed, and being okay with that. Early on I had the virtue of being gifted a number of mentors in my life that helped to affirm that stuff. But even with all of that affirmation, it was really difficult to, I still forget about it. These are constant reminders. So like any physical routine, if it's a workout or a vocal exercise, checking in daily, weekly, minute by minute, and putting in place reminders of the fact that it's a lifelong journey that really has no destination, just really beautiful vistas along the way. And in my life, it's been a process of enjoying those vistas and taking the pleasure in the climb, or in the walk, the journey. And perhaps the first thing to talk about would be what I think is a core element to motivation for working. In my practice, I have a hard time when I have that lightning bolt moment. They come very rarely. Most of my time is spent in process and in doing things that are really almost mindless, and not focusing on creating the world's greatest piece of music or the world's greatest drawing or something like this. A lot of the work for me is investigation, taking time to do the homework and then come by way of that to these moments of epiphany where years of research and process yield a really beautiful cohesive thought. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And that's a quote that I had taped to my desk for a decade when I was working on House of Stone. And finding the why is definitely, in my mind, the integral cornerstone to being able to produce something authentically coming from that inner truth of self. And of course, truth is relative to each of us, but we also all drink from a collective well of consciousness. And I think that the more we can get real honest with why we need to create, nothing will get in the way of that. It'll all facilitate that why. And for me, early on, the why was that I wanted to essentially create for myself an art practice that was a therapy as much as it was an enjoyment, and really the joy of just creating worlds, building narratives that had depth and dimension and were inspired by centuries and centuries of symbolism and archetype. As a kid, I loved archaeology, and I loved figuring out the mechanics of how things worked. And so when I was really getting honest with that question coming out of high school, it was that thing of, well, why do I deserve to make art? Why do I need to create anything? Why not just go lay cement, or do something that was of use to the society in a pragmatic way, Not to say that art isn't, because of course it is an invaluable asset. It's the gemstone, I think, in any culture. And in those of us who are practicing creatives, the more that we dig into that, the more we can be of value as that essential aspect of a culture. And so then, in thinking on this thing of why do we need to make art, or why do we need to create? What's the need that's compelling this? For me, as much as I love aspects of pop culture, that was never my aim. I've often thought it would be really wonderful to find a cross-section between something that could be become popular, but not with that as the direction or the emphasis. And I've had those moments where pieces I've created have hit on a more popular level, but ultimately my intention and aim over the years has been to have an even keel in spite of the fame or the failure, so that I can move and navigate through the ebbs and flows of what is the most fickle aspect of our culture, and that is the creative and performing arts. And frankly, I would submit and propose that the things I'm talking about can be applied to every aspect of life. It doesn't have to be something creative. This can also be the more practical applications that we find ourselves in, from accounting to bricklaying, or any of the other vocations that we would call more traditional jobs, careers, things of that nature. And so the first thing I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already, is begin to just hold that question in your heart and mind as you go through your days. Is why do I need to make? What is that need? And this why can change over the years. For me, it has certainly changed. And there are certain aspects of my why that have remained the same. And first and foremost, if nobody else was listening or looking, I would still be doing the same things, because it simply just makes me feel happy. It inspires that sense of wonder, that childlike awe about the mystery of this life. And a lot of the people that inspired me as I was coming up and really embracing that intuitive knowing in myself were the outsider artists that mentors of mine had introduced me to, people who were out in the middle of nowhere creating their own worlds, writing their own mythology. And a lot of the time, creating it out of tragedy and personal loss is a way to cope with that reality, that loss. And someone with a question about that, struggling with a recent loss, and a friend of mine gave me a book called The Smell of Rain on Dust by this guy Martin Prachtel a couple of years ago. And it's a wonderful piece on the ritual of mourning a loss, whether it's the end of a relationship or the death of a loved one. And he says grief is a form of praise for that which we loved. And I always really loved that one. Really hit nicely when I first read those words. Grief is a form of praise, and to allow ourselves to have that. And so for me, a lot of the work I've created over the years has been a processing of loss, a processing of change. The why being a need to look at the relationships I have with my immediate family, my friends, my community, my country, and pulling from direct life experience, pulling out of that, or distilling out of that, music and expression that inspires the question, what is this? While also touching on really visceral, emotional channels. So finding the why. And if you don't have a journaling practice yet, I would encourage you to start one. For me, I've been keeping journals for the last 20 years. Uh, there's another great book, and I'll post the titles of these in the comments, called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I'm sure many of you know of it. And one of the things that stuck out for me, it was given to me when I was in a real bad writer's or a creative block in 2007. She talks about the morning pages, which is essentially waking up. The first thing you do, you open up that book and you write out 3 pages of whatever's on your brain. You just get it out. And I can't swear by it enough. You don't have to be a writer. In fact, the idea is that you're not judging the work, you're just letting it come. And you put it away, you don't reread it, you don't edit it. This brain purge is sort of like going through your studio space or your house and just getting rid of all of the clutter, getting rid of all these old boxes. You're opening them up, you're looking at it, and you're letting them go. And what happens is by putting it to paper, it's magic. It clears the brain, clears the mind, and allows for a clarity of thought. And out of that journaling process, I started it, and within a month or two, I created an entire installation of children that were lit by starlight. And they were life-size painted cutouts. And these kids became the cover art for House of Stone, the first record that I produced, self-produced. And the important thing to keep in mind too, and I can't emphasize this enough, all good things take time. And I think it's counterintuitive to where our culture has been at. I think one of the beauties of this year is that we're being forced to slow down. We've been moving so fast and on to the next. And of course, with social media, it inspires the attention span of gnats. But I, in my life, have stepped away from that and conscientiously chosen to take my time with the work and realize that in nature, all things take time, and yet the tree grows as it needs to, it bears its fruit. And so being patient with ourselves as we move through, that practice. When I found my voice, it was the beginning of a 10-year journey where I was showing up at my recording console daily and chipping away at these songs, these ideas, these compositions. And sometimes a piece will marinate for a decade before it has that eureka moment. Oh, that's what's supposed to happen there. And that's the beauty of the work, is that when we allow it to grow naturally with our process, then it becomes that much better. And sometimes songs will come in 30 minutes, or a piece of work. Could be visual or whatever. But the journaling process has been a fundamental part of that. And in that journaling, going back to the why, asking that question, writing about that why, having it in a succinct elevator pitch of a sentence, and also being able to expound upon that. And I'll say this too, the morning pages journals, I'll keep that as a separate thing altogether. I also keep essentially vision journals, which I'll record dreams, I'll record song ideas, lyrics, and also research as I'm investigating something I'm excited about, whether it's a piece of mythology. Everything is informing my work. So it could be a trip to the grocery store, something as mundane as that. But always paying attention and trying to be a present state listener with all the senses. The journaling was instrumental in helping me to hone in on what it was that I had to say, what it was I needed to say. And over the years, by way of just getting out there and showing up and recording again and again, like Charlie Parker playing his instrument every day for 18 hours, I was doing the work of refining what it was I was doing and discovering things along the way. And the beautiful thing about something like Cameron's work is, she's all about taking the pressure off of the end result being the picture perfect expression. It's more about focusing on the process and allowing for the work to reveal itself. She had a quote in the book she's like, write this down in your journal or something. Great creator, I will let you focus on the quality and I will focus on the quantity. And in my experience, I'm a perfectionist by nature, so I was very much under that assumption that if I was going to make something, it had to be perfect, had to be excellent. Now, I'm always striving for that, but that's not, again, the destination isn't my end game a lot of the time. Early on, I was doing photorealism. I was doing commission work in that regard. But I moved from that into more expressionistic kind of work, stuff that dealt more with psychology and the subconscious. And on that point, a couple of things came up. One was a process that's similar to the morning pages, but it's in a visual application. I started doing these drawings where I would write a word or a phrase, and then I would outline it. And I would outline it again, and I would outline that outline, and outline that outline. And what began to form was something that looked like a topographic map. We've seen like the little lines that designate altitude. And I would let those grow and grow until a little face would appear or a paw would appear. And at the time I was really interested in, these sort of woven ancestor spirits that were coming up in the work I was doing with House of Stone. But I found that to help me get into a creative flow, just to turn off the thinking mind, these drawings really became more like a meditative act where I was just focusing on outlining the last outline that I made. And then as soon as one felt, and I emphasize the word felt finished, I'd put it away. And over the course of a couple of years, I had done dozens of these. And another exercise like this, which I would encourage you to try, is called quick drawings. And this was an older artist who was sharing this one, and I really liked it. Essentially, and I can demonstrate, you start, I'll do it on this little notepad here. Let's see. Make sure you can see it. Start by signing your name and making a little square, something like this. And then you start with usually you'd have like 3 different levels of Sharpie markers. Right now I just have this fine point pen, so for lack of better utensils, I'll just use this. Start with your thickest Sharpie and you start making marks. Okay, so here's my thick lines. I'm just drawing without really thinking about it. It's all about abstraction. Okay, and then I'd come in with the thinner Sharpie marker, and I would do finer work. Not thinking about it, just moving with it. And then I'd come in with a pen like this and do those final little details. Not thinking, just throwing that ball, so to speak. Okay. And then when I got to a point where it felt like it was done, I'd put this away and I'd do another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. And after 300 or 400 of these, I started having little eyeballs appear, and little spirits. And I remember Sky Jones saying that, by the 600th drawing, you'll have these breakthroughs in the work. And what came out of that were the covers for the House of Stone albums, the 5 deaths that essentially are the gap fillers for that one-man opera. And so with that being said, again, it's embracing process. It's enjoying the process of allowing our childlike self to just create. And then the beautiful part of it, at least from my experience, was one day I turned and look around and I realized that I've got 100 drawings as a body of work. And as a collection, they feel so strong. They look great. And it feels good to have that on paper, something that can be a proof of the progress. And so those are a couple of little tools that I go to again and again and again as I'm working. And whenever I'm in my day-to-day, I also keep journals like this one, which I call vision journals, and these are collections of thoughts and ideas that sometimes are pictographic, sometimes literal, and just writing on little sparks of inspiration. And I have dozens of these, and these pieces inform the work. They inform, the greater pieces, and especially if I'm being called to produce something quickly on a deadline, I can go back to this stuff as essentially a vision Bible of sorts, and I can pull out of that and deliver on time. And I know that the work that's going to come out of that is going to be of quality because it's been vetted. And also the other part of this sort of constantly being in process is very much about the sustainability of the creative spirit. Not relying or waiting on someone else to come knocking on the door, but being our own, showing up for ourselves. There's another book I'd recommend that I really liked called The Hagakure. I'll write that one down too. And it was the memoirs of a Ronin samurai who wanted to commit seppuku or kill himself when his master died, but at that time it was outlawed in Japan, and so he decided to shave his head and become a monk. And the written record has become a resource over the years. In fact, during World War II, it was banned because of the fact that the kamikaze pilots were given a copy of the Hagakure as Japan was experiencing its resurgence in nationalism and the pride in their culture. And so the kamikazes read this book and they embodied the spirit of the samurai, which had largely been lost for a few 100 years in the culture, as they got on their planes and they would fly them into their enemies. And so after the Japanese were defeated, that book was banned. But it's a gorgeous book. It's beautiful because of the fact that you see in there examples of the kind of dedication that a samurai has to his craft. And I would encourage female artists and creatives to read this book too, even though it is from the perspective of a male samurai. The lessons cross gender, as far as I'm concerned. It's for all of us. And the other part of it that was really beautiful for me, that really meant a lot, was to see that these people spend their entire lifetimes until finally attaining samuraihood at the age of 50. And I think in pop culture, at least in Western culture, we have this emphasis on youth and, that timeline of how many years you have to quote unquote make it. And I have essentially thrown that one out the door. Of course, I'm still affected by it, but it's not really a part of my my journey at this point at all. I'm excited about the work that I will be making in 20 years, in 40 years, if I get to live that long. Filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa made Seven Samurai when he was 50 years old. And didn't make his first films until he was in his late 40s. And so enjoying that evolution of process too, and even with my as a singer, with my voice, the voice has been an extension of that pursuit of spirit my whole life. I think of the labyrinth and walking that labyrinth, or the way of the cross, as it's called. Where you're on this path with its twists and turns, and rather than trying to replicate something you were doing at 20, allowing your voice to reflect where you are at 45 or 55 or 35. So a lot of the practice for me has been just being in touch with my emotional inner landscape and allowing that to be accentuated by way of the voice. And that the alchemy of transmuting the sound vocally is something I want. If I had a dream, it would be that every single human being have the opportunity to know what that truly feels like for themselves, regardless of vocal training or ability or any of that. I mean, I firmly believe that everyone has a voice, aside from having a literal physical impairment. And even then, there's some incredible singers. Gosh, there's a guy, I'm forgetting his name. He's a country singer who was a war veteran who got shot through the throat. He's still living. He's a songwriter, and his songs are really beautiful. And he has this curious quality to his voice by way of this injury to his larynx. And to me, it's a nice nod to the idea that by way of adversity, we can create true beauty in the world. By way of the scars that we attain in this life, we can create something that is wholly unique and honest. And so then on the subject of process and research, I don't know, I would encourage everybody, if you are, let's say you're a songwriter, add drawing to a part of your day. If you're a visual artist, try adding a vocal exercising to a part of your practice. Try singing. Even if that's not something that you're pursuing, I like it because it takes pressure off of the muscles. And I think of a bicep versus a tricep, where if you're flexing that bicep, soon enough it's going to become fatigued. But if you do exercises to work the other muscle, it's only going to strengthen the stabilizer muscles that help this one, the bicep. And in the same way, for me, I think rather than just saying I'm going to solely focus on painting my whole life, I've always kept a pretty even Venn diagram of vocations at work and at play. Sometimes, music might take center stage, but while I'm working on songs, I would take a second or take a day to break off from that and work on something visual, because it would allow for that musical aspect to have time to recharge and stay fresh. And that's where the quick drawings come in handy. And in a similar way, I have a practice with vocalization where I have a looper that was given to me as an endorsement about 10 years ago. And what was nice about it, if nothing else, is that it allowed for me to articulate the harmonies, the hundreds of harmonies that I had racing through my mind. And by allowing myself a daily sketch exercise of building quick little motifs that were spinning in my head, it was a similar process like the quick drawing or like the journaling, where I was getting it out on record, and I would record them. For those of us who are singers, and those of us who aren't, I'll just say this. One of the things I'll do for my own mental state is I have loops of my own work that I'll put on my phone, and I'll put them on my earbuds and listen as I'm going through my day or, working on something, because there's something in the tonality of what I'm doing that is a self-help. And it helps my brain. It helps my heart, my mind. And there's a couple of great little apps that I can recommend. The one I've been using for a long time is called VRP7, and I believe it's for the Android and the iPhone. And weekly now I've been doing these hour-long sing-alongs, and I'll take some of these and I'll throw them on an email to myself, and I'll download it, because I have an iPhone. There's that issue where you can't just put media on unless it goes through Apple. Well, this is a workaround. So I've been able to take my hour-long vocal meditations and then pull them down through VRP7, and then I can have that as I'm going through my day. And the other part of this too, speaking of that, is having a morning ritual, which I've just picked up again, and that is some kind of physical exercise or activity. And it's very easy for us to get discouraged and fall off of that, especially as being emotionally sensitive, empathic types. But I know that when I'm spending 30 minutes to an hour doing morning stretches or calisthenic exercises that work my heart rate up and get me into a sweat, it's exercising a lot of that stagnant energy. And I'll put one of these hour-long loop sessions on in my ears so that I can get into that spirit. When I mentioned Venn diagram, I always will visualize for myself what I'm after. So in this case, I've got one circle that's mind, one spirit circle that's body, one that's spirit, and the activities that work both, the activities that solely focus on one, but everything is informing each other. I'm a contextual thinker as opposed to a compartmental thinker. Everything flows together for me, so I'm constantly coming up with ways where I can be addressing mind, body, and spirit in everything I do. I haven't done it because of my environment these days, but for years past, I always kept a garden. When I had a house in Texas, I had a huge backyard garden, and that thing, tending to that, had so many levels of meaning and poetic significance, symbolizing the process of growing something, of tending to something, of having faith and belief in the fact that that little plant was going to produce a vegetable. And if you don't have a gardening practice, that's something to consider. If you have the ability to do it, even if it's a little box with herbs in it, and adding that to your circle of processes, it's just good mental health. It's good for the spirit. It's good for the creative productivity. And I find a lot of gratification by taking a day or 2 days away from my creative studio and just working on my house or my garden, doing something with my hands, taking walks in nature, being able to go out into the world and change the scene, the perspective. And of course, this year it's a really difficult thing to do, more so. But in a lot of ways, it's also a wonderful opportunity for deep introspection, which I'm sure all of us have been doing, whether we like it or not. But I don't know. I feel like the more we can look at it as an invitation, an opportunity for a possibility, the better. And one of the things I was also going to mention on that was the idea of doing the homework with our work. If something doesn't hit with people, if people aren't responding, taking that in stride. Not everything is going to move people, and really that's sort of the icing on the cake in my mind. For years I was after a certain level of notoriety, and then got to a point about 7 years ago where I just said, you know what, no, that's counterintuitive to why I'm doing what I'm doing. Going back to that why, using the why as the compass for decisions that I was making in my life. And in that process of realigning with my why, it was the thing of really honing in on if something wasn't hitting, taking it and doing it again, working it again, producing piece after piece, and just letting go of each one. So a lot of the times I would give work away. If people liked it, oh yeah, take it. Oh, I love this thing. Oh, you have it. There's certain pieces of work that I hold on to of mine, but a lot of the work I'll either sell it or give it away because I would rather other people have it. The more I feel like a big part of my why at this point is to inspire the critical thinking and awe in others so that we can all do better. And I don't want to put a price tag on that. Of course, we have to live in this world with the economics that as they are, but you can surf that and find ways to authentically protect and honor that which is invaluable, while also, finding an economic opportunity in that. So there's some things that I just won't put a price tag on, that I'll do, I'll just say without price, without cost. And other things that I will. But on doing the homework, for me, the research is just as much of part of the joy of creation as much as anything else. And I'm a voracious reader, so over the years I've loved seeking out or being given books to read, um, and all that work from literary to you know, uh, historic. It all informs. Nothing is wasted. Um, on the topic of songwriting, a lot of the time for me, lyrics are harder to come by more and more. I've been more interested, or have responded always more to the music. Um, but it was by way of a few pieces of key literature that were given to me by a mentor that I began to find a way to get around my chattering brain and into that state of creative flow. Um, one of them is a poet by the name of Wallace Stevens. And his wordplay, the way he evoked color with his words, really inspired House of Stone when I was writing those words. I tend to approach songcraft music first, but when it comes to lyrics, I'll start by just almost like with painting, starting with huge, broad, abstract compositional blocks, and then gradually with each layer of paint, honing into the details. And in a similar way, I do the same thing with lyrics. I'll start by writing about what a piece feels like to me. What's coming up as I'm composing the music. And then out of that, I'll come up with prose that has a nice visual flow to it. The words have a nice rhythm to it. And then from there, I'll cut and paste and piece together lyrics out of those books. So, for me, like, I'll have 10 different books that might have stuff that'll just come to me as I'm going about my day-to-day. And from those books, I'll pull key lines, and then I'll piece those together and see how they fit. But right now, I'm entering into what feels like another major body of music that I think will be the next record that I make since House of Stone and all of that work. And what's coming up are years of journaling and writing that are finally coming into focus. There's pieces that I wrote in 2008 that are just now making sense for this. I'm constantly recording music sketches. And out of that, pulling together a tapestry of work that all seems to be really strongly around a particular theme. Let's see. I'm going to write down some of these books too, since we're on the subject. In terms of another piece that I think would be really sweet to check out, there's one called Harmonies of Heaven and Earth, and it delves into the mysticism of music in antiquity and how things came to be as they are now. Also, different ideologies that thinkers and philosophers and mystics had about harmonic relationship to planets. Gurdjieff's laws of octaves are mentioned in there. It's a wonderful survey, and I recommend this as a book to anybody who's interested, because it opens up to a huge swath of different thinkers and writers over the last several centuries who were investigating the mysteries of music and uh, the mystical applications of music. I think its bibliography is a third the length of the book, so I like that one mainly because it's given me a lot of starting points to branch out into other people that I had never heard of until that moment. Another great piece that I'd recommend is called Concerning the Spiritual and Art by Wassily Kandinsky, who is a painter. But what's neat about him as an artist was that he was an attorney first, and then when he retired from law, he picked up painting. But was interested in more than just painting. He was interested in the mechanics of art and how it worked. And so the pieces that he wrote over the years, I have a book of his that's probably 4 inches thick. He spent most of his life, the rest of his life, writing on the ideas of art. You know, what makes a painting strong? You know, why do we create these sorts of questions? Concerning the Spiritual Art is a great introduction because it's a fairly short read. It's a pretty easy piece to get through, but it's so dense and so ripe with ideas. I read that one when I was 19, and it really inspired so much for me. Yeah, he's if you're not familiar with his work, the paintings reflect a lot of his theory, his art theory that he was developing. And in many ways, I feel like that was the great contribution that he had. You know, the other thing I was thinking about that it would be important to write about, you know, in beginning a journaling process, is this the thing of perhaps writing about what it is that's blocking us. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll identify in writing that which is in a lot. All this is intuitive. There's no, I don't think too hard about it. In my journaling process, I'll identify people who inspired me into action, who cultivated the movement of my expressive ability, and the people that stifled it, and identify what it was about the people that stifled what I was naturally born to do. And of course, this is all things that we do. It's all in our own mind, and people are people. But those people in our own mind are very powerful. You know, I have mentors of mine that I'll bring into my room of mind as I'm about to perform or I'm about to work on something. And I'll even have an internal conversation with them like I would have years ago. One woman who was a hero of mine was my academic advisor, Phyllis Strauss, who would leave me walking on water every time I'd visit her in her office when I was attending school at Florida State. And from day one, I walked in with my little portfolio and I showed it to her, and she was so affirming. And she also offered razor sharp critique. And naturally, she was just an empowering presence in my life and in so many other people. And her life, she had 4 kids, was a prominent civil rights attorney in the 60s in Florida, and then retired from law, and she also got her master's in sculpture, and then dedicated the remainder of her life to helping other kids to circumvent and move around a lot of the bureaucratic cancer of the school system. And so she would literally change grades for kids who were not going to graduate because of some hoop that they had to jump, an arbitrary class that they had to take just for a credit. And I loved that about her, is that, you know, she was able to navigate between following rules and breaking them. And so she's a person that I'll call into the space if I'm feeling particularly blocked or closed or incapable of just getting into it for myself. But I would invite you to do that in the journaling process too, is identify who are the people that empower you and who are the people that hold you back in your mind. And then why? Why do they? Why do they? And then a step from that, especially in finding our voice, whether it's visually or musically or performatively, taking time in the journaling process to identify the creatives, we'll just say that, covering performance, visual art, and music, the creatives who are conveying their truth in a way that we believe them. So much of the time, we can detect a poor performance when an actor is lying to us because of the fact that they're not tapped into that authentic emotional core. They don't have tools in hand that allow for them to be truly expressing their emotional conviction. And in the same way, I think we can hear that in a vocal performance. We can see that in a visual piece. And it doesn't matter what we're creating. I believe that process of authentic expression comes through regardless of whether or not you're creating something that is photorealistic in depiction or completely abstract and expressive. So another one that I like to do is write out those particular people that embody that thing, and I'll write as to what it is about their work that embodies it. You know, it's very important to me to always be doing homework, but also to be mindful of not plagiarizing, being inspired by something, but doing the work of developing my own visual or sonic vocabulary. Yeah, I see the question. Yeah, so on the vocal versions of the quick drawings, before I even had a looper, I was using a simple multi-track program to record harmonies. So if you have a looping device, there's things like the Boss RC50. I have the TC Helicon Voice Live Touch series, those guys. Ableton has its own looping capabilities, or if it's just a simple multi-track program like GarageBand, I'll show up at my studio here, and I might have an idea, or I might not. I might just sit down, like, you know, this morning I did the Sunday sing-alongs like I've been doing now for the last 2 or 3 months, and sometimes it'll just be a single tone that'll then develop into an idea, and I'll move that way. And being an active listener is such a integral part of my process. I'm always aiming to try to be present. You know, listening for me is a struggle, like for a lot of us. Being present, not being cluttered by all the thoughts in the mind. But I'll record those looped motifs, and in a lot of ways, it's like sculpting the ear. And now I think I have hundreds of these, or several hundred of these little motifs, and I have them on playlists that I'll just listen through. And you know, playing them through a phone, earbuds. It's yeah. I'll write down the name of that program that I had mentioned that I use for that. If you look this up on the app store or Android's, I forget what Android's app store is called, but it's VRP7. Um, I'll have those pieces on loop, and as I'm thinking about writing music or composing a record, I'll categorize some of those into folders, or at the very least, I'll just have them playing as I'm doing my work. I'll have them on repeat. So in that VRP 7 app, a lot of the times I'll just have one 10-minute track or an hour-long track on repeat. And it gets me into a nice trance state or a meditative state where my mind is clear enough that I'm just moving through whatever the process is, if it's working on something around the house or getting into illustrative work. Like right now I'm drawing a graphic novel, so I'll put on things like that to turn off my chattering mind and to help me to get more present. I hope that answers your question. So anyway, yeah, these are a selection of cliff notes, and there's so much more that I could share. If you do have any other questions, feel free to post them in the comment section of this session. I'll post the books that I had recommended. Yeah, absolutely, you're welcome. And if you have any questions about any of these things, please feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or yeah. Meditate on the why. If you haven't already, start a vision journal. I would also recommend you keep a morning pages journal. And if you don't have a drawing practice, try out the quick drawings. If you get stuck on that, write me and I can assist with that. And if you have the capabilities of starting to use your voice, I highly recommend tapping into that, even if you don't consider yourself to be a singer per se. It doesn't matter. There's a Zimbabwean proverb: if you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. And I think in closing, really what we're after is getting back into the practice of all of this stuff just being holistic aspects of a rich life lived, where we can do more than just survive. We can live, and we can enjoy the life that we do get to have while we have it. So yeah, I'll post the names of these books and a kind of a summation of everything I went over. I invite you to write me on Facebook. I'm just Morgan Sorne on there. And I wish you luck with your creative endeavors. I'll probably do another one of these in a month or so. And maybe at that point we can get a two-way video so that it's a little bit more natural of a conversation. But until then, stay strong and positive, and be kind and good to the people that you love.